My name is Willa Farnsworth. I am 75 years old, and I have been quiet for far too long. I live in a cedar-shingled cottage on the edge of a town so small you could miss it while sneezing past the highway exit. It's quiet here. Peaceful. Birds sing before dawn, and no one asks too many questions. Just how I like it. I grow my own tomatoes. Ain't it? I bake lemon scones on Sundays even though I live alone. People see me as gentle. Harmless. But I wasn't always harmless. And I wasn't always silent. Because once I told the truth. And it ruined everything. The truth I told was this. My father touched me. And my mother told me not to embarrass the family. I was 13. Her exact words, after I finally found the courage to speak. Willa, we don't air dirty laundry. You keep your chin up and you pretend like nothing happened. You want to ruin your father's reputation. You want this whole town looking at you like you're tainted. I sat there on the edge of the floral sofa, legs trembling, heart pounding, feeling dirtier than I had before I said anything at all. I never spoke of it again. Not to her. Not to anyone. Until the day she died. That was 3 weeks ago. She was 93. Frail. Liver spots on her hands and oxygen hissing through clear tubes that looped around her ears like invisible shackles. I sat beside her hospice bed in her own damn living room, because she refused to die in a hospital like lesser women. She drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes she called for me. Sometimes she called for him. "Walter," she'd whisper, voice thin as smoke. "Where's Willa? I haven't seen her since she was a girl." The cruelty of time is that it forgets the details we wish would stay buried and remembers the ones we wish would die. But I remembered. I remembered everything. So I wrote her a letter. 2 pages. Longhand. Folded neatly. I didn't read it to her. I didn't explain. I simply placed it in her hand the night before she slipped away and said, "Mama, here's something to keep you company on your journey." She blinked at me, eyes glassy with morphine and time. I kissed her forehead. And I left. She died before sunrise. And whether she read it or not, I will never know. But what I wrote in that letter changed me. Because finally, after 72 years, I spoke to the girl I used to be. And I told her she wasn't crazy. That she wasn't wrong. That she was never the one who should have been ashamed. And now, as I sit here in the quiet of my cottage, sorting through what little she left behind, I find something I didn't expect. Taped to the back of an envelope marked in her handwriting. "For Willa, when I'm gone." I stare at it now, heart thudding like it used to in that dark house on Magnolia Street. 'Cause I don't know what it opens. But I do know this. If my mother left me something after all these years, it's not out of kindness. It's a thread. And I plan to pull it. Every last inch. The key was small. Brass, tarnished at the edges, with a crooked tooth that looked like it had been filed by hand. The tag taped to it had faded letters. My mother's handwriting, thin and elegant as ever. "For Willa." Stairs. That was all it said. I stared at it for a long time, letting the metal warm in my hand. The farmhouse on Magnolia Street, my mother's house now empty except for furniture and ghosts, sat still and quiet. Even the floorboards had stopped creaking, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I hadn't been upstairs in decades. After I left at 18, I never once stayed the night. I visited on holidays, ate her casseroles, watched her drink from her frosted glasses with pink lipstick stains. I'd sit at the table and pretend we were normal while she talked about the church bake sale and the rising cost of groceries. But I never went upstairs. I never saw my old room again. I never walked past his. Till now. The stairwell groaned beneath my weight as I climbed, slow and deliberate, gripping the railing like it might vanish under my palm. At the top of the stairs, sunlight filtered through a dusty curtain, painting everything in shades of beige and blue. There were 3 doors. One to the bathroom. One to my old room, still painted that pale green the first used to hate. And one at the end of the hall. His study. Locked always, even when he was alive. The key trembled in my hand. I approached it like a girl again. Not 75. 15. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a heavy click. And the door creaked open. The air inside hit me like a wave. Old tobacco. Paper. Memories I never gave permission to survive. The room was exactly as he left it. Bookshelves floor to ceiling. Heavy oak desk. An armchair with a worn red cushion. The carpet was faded, but still bore the same coffee stain he blamed on me one summer when I was 9. I stood frozen in the doorway, as if crossing that threshold would somehow make it all real again. And then I saw it. A small wooden box on the desk. No dust on it. Nowhere. My hands moved without my permission. I opened the lid. Inside were letters. Dozens. All addressed in my mother's handwriting. Ultimi. I stared. Breath caught in my chest. I pulled the first one free and unfolded it. Willa, you don't have to read these. In fact, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. But I wrote them anyway. One every year since the day you left. I didn't know how else to speak to the girl I raised. The girl I failed. I know what I did. I knew it the moment you looked at me with those eyes and told me the truth I had spent my whole life trying not to see. I dropped the letter like it had burned me. 'Cause it had. For 62 years I had carried the belief that I was abandoned by a mother too proud to care, too traditional to fight, too proper to protect. And now, in the room where I was never meant to enter again, I found her words stacked in secret. Her pen scratching apologies she never spoke aloud. I sat down shaking. Opened another. I should have left him. I should have burned it all down. But I was a woman of my time, and that's not an excuse, it's a curse. I believed keeping the family together was more important than protecting my daughter. I believed reputation mattered more than pain. But I know now I was wrong. I was so wrong, Willa. I hope someday you forgive me. But I understand if you don't. Tears came quietly. Bitter. I didn't sob. I didn't scream. I just let them fall silently, the way I used to cry into my pillow at night with a door between us and a mother who pretended not to hear. There were dozens more letters. All dated. All signed. All sealed in silence. Till now. That night, I brought the box back to my cottage. I didn't read them all at once. Just one before bed. Like medicine. Or penance. Each one carried a different tone. Some full of regret. Some rambling, scattered. Some sharp, like she was still defending herself even while admitting guilt. But through it all, I began to see her differently. Not as the cold woman who folded laundry while I suffered under her roof, but as someone who was terrified. Someone who believed the lie that silence would keep the world from breaking. Someone who thought shame was safer than truth. And someone who, in her own way, tried to make it right, even if it was far too late. A week later, I returned to the house one final time. I brought the letters. Brought the key. And I brought one more thing. A letter. The one I left on her deathbed. The one she may or may not have read. I placed it inside the wooden box, on top of all the others. Then I closed the lid. And I lit a match. The fire caught quickly. I watched from the backyard as the flame consumed the letters, hers and mine, until the box was nothing but black ash and curling paper. Because some stories aren't meant to be passed down. Some truths don't belong in the hands of others. They belong to the women who carried them. And the daughters who survived them. But this story, mine, I'm ready to tell it now. Not in whispers, not in secrets, in full voice. Because her silence cost me a childhood. But my voice, it might just save someone else's. If you're feeling this moment deep in your bones, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. I was 16 when I first packed a suitcase and told myself I'd never look back. It was a Tuesday in July. Hot and heavy with the kind of southern humidity that made everything stick to your skin. My mother was at her women's auxiliary meeting. My father was passed out in his armchair, empty glass on the floor, belt buckle still loose from a rage he'd taken out on the screen door earlier. The house was quiet, and I hated the quiet. 'Cause it made my heart too loud. That summer I had learned to move like a ghost. Tough feet, careful hands, eyes always down. My mother called it being respectful, called it survival. I had just discovered a small envelope in my dresser drawer. Money. Not much. Maybe $20. I didn't know who put it there. Maybe a teacher who suspected. Maybe a neighbor. Or maybe I left it there in some forgotten act of desperation. But it felt like a sign. So I packed 2 blouses, a skirt, the tiny photograph of me and my brother that we took before he left for the army, and a dime store paperback with a missing cover. I waited until midnight. I crept past my father's room, heart pounding so hard I thought it might wake the devil. I reached the back door, turned the knob slowly. The cool night air brushed against my face, carrying the scent of cut grass and possibility. Then came the voice. Whoa, dangerous. Where you headed, girl? My father stood in the hallway, shadows slicing across his face. Froze. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. He walked closer. Every step slow, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world to ruin mine. You think you're gonna run away, he said. Think the world's got something better for you than this house? He grabbed the strap of my suitcase, yanked it so hard my shoulder jerked forward. You wanna end up like your cousin Diane, he hissed. Living in a boarding house, waiting tables for drunks, nobody to protect her? He spit the word protect like it was a joke. Like he didn't know what he had done. Or maybe he did. Maybe that was the point. He snatched the suitcase from my hand and turned to go. Get back to bed, Willa. You wake your mother, and I'll make sure you don't sit for a week. I did as I was told, because I had nowhere else to go. The next morning the suitcase was gone, and at breakfast my mother said nothing. She looked at me, right at me, with her perfect pink lipstick and her church pearls, and she said, "Would you be a dear and take the pie to Mrs. Lark today? She hasn't been feeling well." He nodded, because pretending was safer than screaming. But something changed in me that night. Wall. Switch. I stopped writing in my journal. Stopped singing in the shower. Stopped asking questions. I became who they wanted. A quiet daughter with pressed skirts and a practiced smile. On Sundays, I sat in the pew beside my mother and held her hand during the Lord's Prayer. On Mondays, I walked to school with my head down and my knees red from scrubbing floors. And every night, I locked my bedroom door and stared at the ceiling like it owed me answers. My teachers called me polite. My church called me gracious. My mother called me well-trained. But inside, I was already gone. It was Mrs. Ford who first saw it. My art teacher. She had silver hair and wore boots in the summer and never once raised her voice. She kept me after class one afternoon. "Willa," she said, "do you know what happens when you bottle up a storm?" I shook my head. "It builds," she said. "Until one day, it breaks the sky wide open." I didn't speak. She handed me a paintbrush. "Stop writing what you can't say. Start painting it." And I did. That week, I painted a black canvas with a single white streak down the center. Just one violent shaking line. She hung it in the school hallway. No one understood it. But I did. It was the shape of my scream. The day I graduated high school, I didn't wait for applause. I walked straight from the ceremony to the Greyhound station with $50 in my shoe and a promise to myself. You will never live in silence again. I boarded a bus to Nashville. Told the driver my name was Ellie Grace. By the time I stepped off that bus, I had buried Willa Farnsworth beneath years of fake smiles, whispered warnings, and birthday cakes served with trembling hands. Took me years to use my real name again. Decades to feel like my voice belonged in the world. Even longer to speak the words out loud. But now, at 75, I say them without flinching. My father touched me. My mother knew. And she chose silence. People say forgiveness is healing. But I've learned that sometimes, truth is the only balm that works. And telling it, writing it, living it, that's the real freedom. That's how we run. And this time when I packed my bag, I never looked back. If my story is bringing tears, anger, or strength to your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Took me 61 years to say it out loud in front of other people. Not on paper. Not in the mirror. Not in whispered confessions to myself when the wind howled and the ghosts were loud. But out loud. Into a microphone. In a church basement with peeling linoleum floors and folding chairs that groaned when you sat too hard. It was a Tuesday night. The flyer had read, Community Healing Circle. Share your story, reclaim your voice. Tessa had sent it to me in a text. She said, you don't have to go. But I think it's time. She was right. There were maybe 30 of us in that room. Mostly women. Few men. All ages. Some trembling. Some scarred. Some with eyes that had seen too much and mouths that had been quiet for too long. The organizer was a young woman named Anaya. Braided hair. Strong hands. Soft voice. She welcomed everyone. Gave the rules. You didn't have to share. But if you did, you had the floor. No one would interrupt. No one would question. No one would ask for proof. Just listening. Just presence. That alone was more than I'd ever been given. I sat in the back, heart thudding, palms clammy. And then she said, anyone ready? A long silence. Clearing of throats. A shuffle of papers. And then, before I could change my mind, I stood. The chair squeaked behind me. Anaya nodded, stepped aside, and I walked slowly to the mic. The room blurred. All I could hear was the thump of my heartbeat and the blood rushing in my ears. But I spoke anyway. My name is Willa, I said. And then I told them. Not everything, but enough. I told them about the room at the end of the hall. About my father's footsteps. About the night I tried to run. About the look in my mother's eyes when I said the words and how she met them with silence. And then I paused. For a long time. Somewhere in the back someone sniffled. And I said, for 72 years I carried the blame. For 72 years I thought maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I exaggerated. Maybe I deserved it. But I didn't. I was a child. I was hurt. And nobody helped me. And then I ended with this. I wrote my mother a letter the day before she died. She never apologized. But she left me a key. I found her letters after she passed. She knew. All along. And she kept it buried to protect a man who never deserved her protection. I swallowed hard. I don't need your pity. I don't need applause. I just want you to know, it's never too late to speak. And then I sat down. My hands trembled. But my shoulders were lighter. For the first time in my life, I was not alone in my truth. Afterward, a few women came up quietly. One hugged me. Another whispered, thank you for saying what I couldn't. I left that church basement with a strange warmth in my chest. Not joy. Not relief. A space. Like there was finally room inside me for something other than fear. But not everyone was glad I spoke. 3 days later I got a knock on the door. It was Lydia Vance, the pastor's wife, dressed in a pressed blazer and kitten heels. She clutched her purse like it was full of judgment. "Miss Farnsworth," she said. "May I come in?" I didn't answer. She stepped forward anyway. "I heard about the meeting," she said. "And I just want to say we all understand grief looks different for everyone. But dragging up the past, especially things that involve your family name, well, it causes ripples, Willa. People start asking questions." I stared at her. Her thin smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just saying," she went on, "maybe it's best to keep these things between you and God." I took a deep breath. Then I said, "God already knows. It's the rest of the world that needs catching up." She flinched. "Willa," she said sharply, "you're a respected woman in this town. Don't ruin what little peace you have left by stirring things that don't need stirring." I stepped forward, my voice low and calm. "I was 13 when I told the truth the first time. My mother told me not to embarrass the family. Now you're telling me the same thing." She blinked. "You know what that tells me," said. "That nothing's changed. And that's exactly why I'll keep talking." Lydia didn't respond. She just turned and left, heels clicking down the path like gavel strikes. That night I wrote a letter. Not to her. To myself. "You're not wrong. You're not too late. You are not what they tried to make you. You are free." I folded it and placed it on my nightstand. Because sometimes the person who needs to hear the truth most is the one who finally spoke it. Tessa called me that evening. "I heard you spoke," she said. "I did. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of me too." The next week, Anaya asked if I'd speak again. Not at the basement, but at the library. Bigger room. More chairs. Said yes. Not because I wanted attention, but because someone needed to see an old woman stand tall and say, "This happened. I survived. And I refuse to be quiet about it anymore." If Willa's voice gave you courage, leave a comment, click like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The day after my second public talk, I received a package in the mail. No return address. Just my name in blocky handwriting and a faded postmark from a town 3 states away. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity is louder than fear when you've spent your life being quiet. Inside was a photograph. Black and white. Curled edges. It was me, age 13, standing beside my mother on the front porch of our old house. I was wearing a Sunday dress. She had one hand on my shoulder, the other shielding her eyes from the sun. We were smiling. But when I looked closer, my smile was strained. My eyes were not those of a child. They were the eyes of someone already surviving. And taped to the back of the photo was a note. "You don't know me, but I knew your mother. I worked with her for years. I found this in her desk after she passed. Thought you should have it." There was no signature. I held the photo for a long time. It felt like a ghost, one last remnant of a woman who had once told me silence was more important than justice. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, stared at my reflection, and for the first time in decades I saw her. The girl I used to be. Not the survivor. Not the speaker. Not the woman who made it out. But the little girl who never had a chance to scream. She looked right at me. And I did something I'd never done before. I spoke to her. Loud. Like she was real. Like she was still inside me. Because in a way she was. I said, "I'm sorry I left you behind." She didn't blink. "I'm sorry I believed them when they said you were the problem." I swallowed hard. And I'm sorry it took me this long to come back for you. Then, with hands shaking, I unfolded the final letter I had written weeks ago but never mailed. It was addressed not to my mother, not to my father, but to that little girl. To 13-year-old Willa. I read it aloud. Dear Willa, you did nothing wrong. You were brave. You were honest. And you were left alone when you needed someone most. That was not your fault. That was never your fault. The people who were supposed to protect you failed. But I won't fail you now. I will speak for you. I will stand for you. I will love you. I will make sure they remember. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are me. And I am proud of you. Love. Willa. I folded it back up and placed it in a box beside the mirror. Next to it I laid the photo. Then I lit a candle. Not for mourning, but for memory. 3 weeks later, I was invited to speak at a regional survivor summit. Hundreds of people. Real stage. A podium with a mic that didn't squeal when you breathed. I stood there, wearing a blue shawl my mother had knitted years ago. For once, it didn't feel like armor or disguise. It felt like a thread between who I was and who I'd become. It told my story. All of it. Not just the pain. Not just the silence. But the transformation. The burning down. The rebuilding. The rising. People cried. People clapped. But most importantly, people listened. The video was streamed live. All across the state. Thousands of views. And in the final minute, when I read the letter again, I closed with a message that reached further than I ever thought my voice could go. To every little girl still waiting to be heard. Hear you. To every grown woman who still carries that child inside. See you. And to every person who was told to stay silent so others could stay comfortable. Your truth is not a weapon, it's a light. Shine it. Let it burn. When I returned home that night, my porch was covered in letters. Dozens of envelopes. Messages scrawled on napkins, postcards, notebook paper. Some from women I'd never met. Some from girls as young as 13. One simply said, "Because of you I finally told someone. Thank you. I'm not alone anymore." I wept, not because I was sad, but because I finally understood. My silence never protected anyone. But my voice, it just might save someone else. My mother died believing silence was strength. I live now knowing that strength is speaking, even when your voice shakes. Especially when it shakes. And every morning when I pass the mirror, I nod to the girl who still lives behind my eyes. She nods back. We made it. Together. If this story moved you, if Willa's journey reminded you of someone you love, or a part of yourself you've buried, leave a comment, click that like button, and subscribe for more powerful true-to-life stories. Your voice matters. Let's break the silence together.